Okay, let's go into question 6. So, question 6 has a number of issues that we can talk about here that are important. Now, um, if you remember when we talked about this idea of basic earnings per share, we were saying that if you do, for comparison reasons, if you calculate the basic earnings per share, for example, of 2005, where nothing happens in that year, and then you have stuff happening in 2006, for comparison reasons, we need to go back and we need to adjust, if you like, the number of shares for 2005, as though it's just a comparison, as though you had those number of shares in X6. Um, and that's fundamentally the point. So, for example, if you had, I think in the exam in the study text where we go without going to it, I think the question I remember this they had 800,000 shares in X5, and then and you calculate your basic EPS based on these 800,000 shares, and then here you basically have I think they had 1.2 million shares or something along those lines. And so we now had to basically have the same earnings, but just divide that by 1,200 shares, if you like. And what we did, if you remember, was we said that, well, imagine that I was increasing these 800,000 by a bonus fraction, for example. I was increasing this by imagine I was doing 1 for 5, 1 for 5. I was basically increasing it by, say, of course, therefore these new shares would increase by times 6/5, right? That's what I was doing. But remember, what I'm really doing is I'm saying here my earnings divided by my number of shares times this bonus fraction. But in effect, what I'm really doing is, if this is my earnings per share, well, I could just argue that this is the same thing as sort of saying earnings over this times 5/6. It's the same. Mathematically, it's exactly the same thing. So if I'm given an earnings per share figure, all I have to do is multiply by the inverse of the bonus fraction, and I will arrive at that figure. I mean, it's the same thing. I'm taking the denominator and multiplying it by the bonus fraction, but this 5 comes over here. It's exactly the same thing when you do it mathematically, which is what's happening here. But so you can see here, this event is not really, they're really asking for the restated. The question is saying, what is the restated comparative? So the question here is, it's not really talking about 2006, it's talking about 2005, because the focus is on the comparative. So the question here is, if you remember, what is the bonus fraction? And we went through the process of calculating the bonus fraction. And the bonus fraction was, we first of all, what we had to do was to calculate this TERP, if you like, the theoretical X right price, and really what's the value of a share now, given that you're issuing another share at a lower amount. And you remember we went through the process, and it is a process of saying, well, you have 4 shares. If you're doing 1 for 1, what you have now, the average value of a share, if you like, the net value of a share now after getting a share in for less money is to say you have 4 shares at £2 and you have 1 share at £1.80, right? Because that's what you've paid, that's what you've received for this share. You receive £2 for 4 shares each, £2 each for 4 shares, and 1 share at £1.80, and that takes you to 5 shares at, well, this is £8 and this is £1.80. So that's 5 shares at £9.80, giving you an average value or TERP value of £9.80 divided by 5, which I believe comes out £9.80 divided by 1.5. Sorry, £9.80 divided by 9.8 divided by 5 gives you 1.96. So the TERP is equal to 1.96. Now, what does that mean? So this is the TERP. So the way we calculate the bonus fraction, I mean, this is just theory. We don't have if you watch the video, you'll see us get through the full theory of why the bonus fraction is literally the market price, which is 2, divided by the TERP. So this is the bonus fraction, 2 over 1.996, and this is the bonus fraction. So what they were testing you really here was on calculating a bonus fraction of 2 over 1.96. So now that you know what the bonus fraction is, and you have the previous year's earnings per share, exactly what I was saying, you now have 0.45, and you're literally multiplying this by the inverse of the TERP to arrive at your answer. In effect, imagine this had been something like 45 over 100. This is sort of saying something like this is times 2 over 1.96, but in effect, this is the same thing as sort of saying 0.45, which is this, times 1.92 over 6. Exactly the same thing. I'm basically increasing the number of shares to take into account the additional free shares I'm given as a result of this being a rights issue. Remember, this is a rights issue. So some shares here are free and some shares here are at market value. That's the whole point of a rights issue, giving some shares free and some shares, when I say free, bonus, and some shares are at market price. And that's what we're trying to work out, this extra bonus bit. And we can do that via the TERP. So when you do this, when you do 0.45 times 1.96 divided by 2, you have 0.441. So, or 44.1p. Right? Cool, great stuff. Please send me an email. I'm going to send all of you individual emails. Send me an email if you're not happy with this, and I can look at it individually with you. But that's the process. Hopefully you'll be happy with the process. Okay, great. Which of the following is not an adjusting event? Right, so not an adjusting event. So I think this was a good question in that it tested you on two things. So this is your reporting date, 31st of March. And this is when the accounts were approved, 11th of June. So this is the period we consider adjusting and non-adjusting. So it's really important that we don't consider it post the 11th of June. We're only interested in what's happened between the 31st of March and the 11th of June. Right, so the discovery of a material error, we always go back, and it says material, we always go back and fix errors. So this is an adjusting event. Remember, all errors. Insolvency, yes, we do. We go back. We have some evidence. So basically, an adjusting event is where we have some evidence. And with insolvency, you would have had some evidence. This is shortly after the year. So 17 days, in fact. So you must have known that this person was struggling to pay you. So adjusting event. And here, an amount received. So no problem. No one's saying that. But as at the year end, if we felt that this was going to happen, this would have been a contingent asset. And where contingent assets are probable, we disclose, right? So it's only where we have certainty, and that certainty really should happen in its year. So in the year, so we don't go back and adjust for contingent assets. No, we just disclose. It's just not prudent to do so. So this is the only one where you have no control. It's really about having no evidence. So this one is because of prudence, but this is really about having no control. You have no control over Forex movements. And so we don't go back and adjust whatever it is that's now being affected by that. And this happened during May. So there's still some time to argue that it's still far away from the reporting period. The key point here is that this is the non-adjusting event here. Forex. So a bit like announcements and dividend payments. Those are all non-adjusting events. Right. I thought this was again, if the chapter on interpretation covers this, but it's really this understanding again what's happening with working capital cycle, which you might remember. And as you read it, I'm going to do it again and play with it. The whole principle here is really arguing or trying to assess how long it takes from investing £1 to receiving it. So typically when you start your process, you will go out there and imagine you buy some stock. So you have on day one, and that stock is sitting on average. I mean, what this is basically trying to say is that on day one, you buy the stock and it's sitting in your stockroom for 62 days. And then you now release the stock to someone, if you like, and therefore you're waiting. These are your receivable days. You're waiting, if you like, to receive money from this person. So basically, you have something that you've invested in, holding on for 62 plus a certain period of time, X days, your receivable days. But of course, this is mitigated, if you like, or softened by the fact that you are also holding out on paying people, if you like, for another 53 days, which is your payable period. So this sort of calculation, it basically is telling you how long you're having to wait for cash, if you like, and that's really the calculation of working capital cycle. And we can see here that the working capital cycle here of 57 days basically is equal to 62 plus the receivable days, which I don't know, minus the 53 days, because that reduces the amount of time I'm waiting. So in effect, to get X, of course, I must say 57 plus 53 minus 62, right? Is equal to X, and that happens to be 48 days. Okay, great. So now I have my 48 days. Oops, sorry. Let me get rid of that. And the question again here, I guess, is an understanding of those, a real understanding of what ratios mean. What does it? I mean, what does this mean? These are fractions, really, right? These are percentages. What we're saying, right, is that my receivable balance, my actual receivable balance, divided by my revenue. What percentage of my what percentage of my revenue am I still holding at the end of the year? That's what receivables. That's what this is really trying to test. Receivables. I'll just put a little receivables. I'll call it X if you like, over my revenue. I could do it as a percentage, but we do it as a percentage of the year. And I'm basically saying that this receivable balance over my revenue times 365 is equal to 48 days. That's what I'm saying, right? And they've given me revenue. Revenue is 438. So X over 438,000 times 365 is equal to 48 days. So I basically need to solve for what is receivables. And when you do all that, you will see that your answer, so basically 48 times 438,000 divided by 365 gives you 57,600. So I guess this was the key thing here. And again, with some quick revision, you will see that you're happy with calculating your working capital cycle. Now, this was impairment. And if you remember, I'll just do it the long version. We said there were three ways when it came to valuing assets. We have their carrying amount. So this was sitting at in your statement of financial position. And you have the fair value less cost to sell. And you have the value in use. Now, what we're doing is we sort of ask the question. We used to have only this one. But now we say, listen, let's actually find out what's better. What's higher of these two? Fair value and value in use. There's something called the recoverable amount. The recoverable amount is higher. So it might still have some value. So let's take that higher. That's the higher amount. And now we compare the recoverable amount with the carrying amount sitting in your statement of financial position. Oh, I've gone past 10 minutes. And so, of course, if the recoverable amount is higher than your carrying amount, then it is impaired. So an asset is impaired if the, forgive me. If the carrying amount is higher than your recoverable amount, then it is impaired. So an asset is impaired if the carrying amount is greater than the recoverable amount. Those are the two things I'm comparing. So for example, imagine this is sitting at 12,000 and the recoverable amount is 10. It's too high in the financial position. It needs to come down. If it was the other way around, you'd leave it as it is because it's already lower than the recoverable amount, so you won't do anything. Now, finally, I'm sure you're probably getting better with these. When you decide to hold something as held for sale, it is available for immediate sale. We expect to sell it over the next 12 months. There is a committed plan to sell it. Asset is no longer in use by the entity. That doesn't mean it's held for sale, if you like. There's just no correlation. Just because you're no longer using it means you have to openly declare that you intend on holding things for sale and take action. And there's none here. If you like. So you continue depreciating this asset, continue depreciating it as though it is in use, if you like. And so that, yeah, and that's us taken to number 10.